influencing popular culture, politics, and everything in between. The local station takes you ringside as we discuss the crazy world that is professional wrestling. This is Going Ringside with The Local Station.
Hello there, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Going Ringside. So glad you could be with us. Before we move on to that man who you probably recognize, Godfather, a.k.a. Papa Shango, I want to talk to you about last week. Mike Chioda was here, one of the legendary referees of all time in WWE, talking about reffing the biggest matches of all time. We go in depth on Hogan versus Rock, Rock versus Austin, Angle versus Lesnar. You know, the big matches. Mike Chioda was in the middle of it. Go check it out. We also do a lengthy segment remembering Shad Gaspard, one half of Crime Time, who died a few years back rescuing his son from drowning in the ocean. Impressive story. We talk about Shad Gaspard last week's episode as well. This week, we're moving on to that man, one of my favorite wrestlers ever. So you probably know him better as the Godfather, but here, during this interview, he's dressed up as Papa Shango. Charles Wright, you probably remember well, he was a fixture in WWE through the 1990s. So he really came on the national scene in that incantation, the Voodoo Man, Papa Shango. He was involved in a major storyline in one of those early 90s WrestleManias. Then his gimmick shifted. He became Kama, the Ultimate Fighter, was part of the $1 Million Corporation with Ted DiBiase. And when UFC was just in its infancy, he kind of portrayed someone like that. Very believable, legit fighter in that character. But then by the Attitude Era, Charles Wright changes his character. He joins the Nation of Domination and becomes eventually the Godfather. We're a family show. You know the Godfather. You know why he was so popular. I'll leave it at that. But as I've said, during the Attitude Era, at his peak, he would get some of the biggest pops in arenas all over the country and world, as big as Stone Cold Steve Austin. Godfather was massively over during wrestling's biggest boom period ever. He was a fixture in the Attitude Era, and one of the reasons why a lot of parents groups were complaining to WWE because they didn't like the Godfather character, him and Val Venus, really. But he was so over, and in this interview, he's going to talk about why he eventually kind of faded away after the Attitude Era. We will talk about that as well. So excited to talk to him. Let's just call him why you know him. Here is the Godfather. We're excited to be joined today by Charles Wright. You know him better here, I guess, as Papa Shango, but there have been other incantations over the years, including the Godfather, Kama. Let's talk about Papa Shango first, because that's how you're presenting today. Tell me all about it, sir. We have a Jerry Lawler. We have a Jerry Lawler invasion right here.
How are you? Always.
The king is here.
I'm smiling. I very seldom smile. That's my hero right there. My very first match ever, was against that man in Memphis, Tennessee.
Were you working in his territory back then?
No, he came to a wrestling school that I was in. He seen me. I hardly knew anything about wrestling. And my very first match ever, with no practice matches, with no beginning matches, was against him, and I beat him on a Monday night in Memphis.
Well, Lawler is one of those ones I always saw they'd put in with anyone because he could work with, particularly like the celebrities and stuff.
We work with me. It's like working with a broomstick. So yeah,
really,
very talented man.
So after Memphis, how did you wind up eventually in the World Wrestling Federation with this gimmick that you're wearing right now?
I went through the process. Went to Japan. I went to Germany for a year. When I came back, they gave me a call. They gave me a tryout. Vince hired me. But he didn't. He says, you got a body of a monster, but you got a baby face. And so he goes, I got to do something with your face. He called me a couple months later, and he says, I want you to go rent the movie Live and Let Die. There's a voodoo character. That's where this came from.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this came because he wanted to hide my face.
Now, you work a lot with Taker early on because you guys have overlapping gimmicks, and you're, I think, friends pre-WWF, is that right?
Yes. I've been friends with Mark since '87.
Because you guys started together roughly about?
I met him with the same time I was working with Jerry, and we put us together, and we just became lifelong friends. I just did his podcast last week. So,
oh, you did? How's he doing in retirement?
He's doing great. He's living the dream.
He enjoys retirement, okay?
Oh, yeah. It's hard to get him out of the house.
I'm sure. So you are Papa Shango. Let's talk about some of the high points of that. There was the WrestleMania 9 or 8. You're involved in the main event. And you do the run-in.
Yeah, that was pretty exciting to be there, to get that type of a push at the beginning. To
with
be
all
involved
the biggest
with,
guys ever.
Hogan and the Warrior. I just so far back, I got to remember everything.
Were you was it kind of overwhelming to have
what? No, because my life has been so exciting, and I've done so many cool things. It was just another one of the cool things I've done.
Eventually, honestly, one of my favorite gimmicks for you is when they switch you to Kama. How did they decide, okay, Papa Shango's had its run, let's try something different?
Every time that it's a long story, but I always had another business. I always owned topless clubs in Vegas.
Okay.
And so I always had a means of making money. So when wrestling was not fun for me, I would leave. I'd be like, Vince, I'm going through tables, I'm getting hit. I could be at home looking at naked women. You have to edit some of this. So that's why you'd see me come and go, and they'd call me, try to get me to come back, and I'd say no.
Yeah.
And then they'd come up with something. But yeah, that's why you'd see me come and go, because I'd be like, Vince, time for me to,
Eventually, you're going to switch to where your star goes off, but you're invited into the Nation.
Yeah.
You go into the Nation of Domination. Very controversial, but very over gimmick as a faction. What was that like?
Great. We didn't know at the time the significance of it, but just a bunch of guys that were friends having a good time.
Did you know Rocky was going to be what he was at the time?
I knew that they had big plans for Rocky, but he had to still come through and do it. But I mean, we knew the plans they had for him.
And then eventually, the gimmick changes. You're Kama the Godfather kind of, and then eventually Godfather just starts, and it goes off like a rocket.
That was a good one. That was all my wife's idea.
It was your wife's idea,
yes,
really?
Not WWE, my wife's idea.
Okay.
Isn't that crazy?
That is ironic, yeah.
I've got a good wife.
Apparently. So you become the Godfather. When did you know it was over and it was working?
Because they were going more PG. They were being more, political correct, and they were getting rid of the DX and the Suck It and the puppies and the Val Venuses, and it had come to an end. And then I was like, well, I was done at that point. I'm like, I'm done.
But your pops were on par with Austin at that time.
Yes, they were.
You knew it worked at that point. You knew it was working.
Something was working, but I had a great time.
So eventually you retire. You still do it. Why do you still get involved? Why do you still do these all these years later?
I'm retired now. I do so many a year. It's fun to be around the people and have some fun. My son's here with me, and just having a great time.
Well, Charles Wright, Papa Shango, I guess we'll say today. Thanks for joining us on the show today.
You're welcome.
Well, to discuss Godfather, we are joined again by friend of the show, Desiree Josen with Chutes and Ladders podcast. Desiree, thanks for coming back on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Before we start, because I know you've had some interaction with Godfather, talk to me about where they can find Chutes and Ladders.
Chutes and Ladders, you can find us on Spotify and YouTube, and Facebook and Instagram at the Chutes and Ladders.
And how's the show going?
So good. We just filmed our 100th episode.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's very exciting.
Yeah.
So Godfather, you're here in North Florida with us.
Yeah.
You were at River City Wrestling Con last year where we talked to Godfather. Mm-hmm. You talked to him a lot. You got to spend a lot of time with him. Is that right?
It was amazing. It was not what I expected, and I got 2 days with him as Papa Shango and Godfather. And
we interviewed him, as you saw, as Papa Shango. Yeah. I want to stop you right there. You said not what you expected. What did you expect versus what did you get?
I expected him to be in character and just very welcoming like everybody else. However, he was the one that caught me off guard, where he was so much fun, so friendly, so warm.
Yeah.
And I actually got a lot of one-on-one, basically like a shoot with him, and got a lot of good stories.
Really?
Yeah.
Any that you can share?
I asked him about what inspired Papa Shango, and he said it was Vince. Told him to watch, was it one of the James Bond movies, Live and Let Die?
Oh, really?
So, he talked about how, he created his own character based on the voodoo character itself, and just made it his own. And
I thought it was a good feud for early Taker.
Yeah.
Taker needed another person from the dark.
Something dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, did he talk much about Godfather? Because Papa Shango is something diehard wrestling fans. Godfather broke through to another level for him.
Absolutely. What I didn't know is he said it was his wife that came up with the whole visual and the concept of The Godfather.
Really?
Yeah, she was so supportive and said, you know what, why not? It's fun. It'll get a pop. And she was definitely right.
Well, a few things that he was doing got a pop when he would bring down the ring, which, because of where I work, we'll keep it PG here.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about him, and he was part of whatever Taker's kind of posse was.
BSK, the Bone Street crew.
Yeah, so they had, I mean, everyone knew about the Clique. I mean, publicly you knew about the Clique. I don't think we really learned about BSK until the internet came like years later, but they were just as important of a faction with Taker, Charles Wright, or Papa Shango, Godfather. The Godwins, I think, were in it. Yokozuna.
Rikishi. Mr. Fuji, Paul Bear.
Yes, but they were more, I think, guys that were beloved by fans. The Clique was controversial.
Yes.
People loved or hated Shawn, loved or hated Nash. Most people enjoyed Scott Hall, but he had his own drama. But the members of BSK were something like all wrestling fans just liked them.
They were just super cool, and the only reason they were together and where they got the name from was because they played dominoes.
Really?
That's
backstage.
something that he told me, and he said he inspired a lot of what The Undertaker does today, like motorcycles, country music.
And I saw old stuff before WWF. I think he and Taker came up together and feuded back in the day. So that's intriguing to see. So what's he like? Is he chill? Is he like Godfather at all?
He is so much fun.
Yeah.
So much fun. He's so happy. His energy is so great and welcoming, and he loves what he does.
When I think of guys I would like to hang out with, just to be around for a while, I think of Flair. I think of a few others. I think Godfather is one that I think fans would want to see.
By the end of the weekend, I genuinely felt like we were friends. And so I feel like if I see him now, I'm like, oh, that's my friend, Charles Wright.
Yeah. And why do you think his career wrapped for the most part when Godfather's run was over after the Attitude Era? He told me in the interview he could see the writing on the wall that the company was changing. It was no longer him and Val Venus.
Yeah.
That they weren't able to repackage him. Were you surprised that they didn't repackage him?
I'm surprised, but then you look at it, he had a good 10-year run.
Which is a lot.
It's pretty good, and that time was a lot. And to say that you were part of the Attitude Era from start to finish is huge.
A major part of the Attitude Era. He was him and Val Venus are the reason the Parents Television Council was going after Vince, in my opinion, to a point. And DX with the crotch chops and stuff. He also had, and one thing I overlook is Kama.
Yes.
I was one of the guys who liked that. This is before I knew anything about Godfather. I thought it was really cool because it was before we had actual real fighters.
And he looked like a fighter.
He looked like a fighter. So when I'm a teenager, I was sitting there watching. I was like, oh wow, he looks really tough. Like I thought it was kind of a cool gimmick back when UFC was just starting.
Right, and he's so big anyway. He's like 6'6", 6'7", and then part of Nation of Domination. With that, he was a powerhouse.
So the Nation, I would say, with the exception of Ahmed Johnson, who we'll talk about on a future episode, I think they had a lot of success. Well, D'Lo, I did enjoy D'Lo.
Yeah.
Mark Henry obviously did what he did. Farouk was who he was.
The Rock.
I mean, there was The Rock.
I think he did okay.
But Godfather, I would say, was one of the more success stories coming out of the Nation. It really helped him transform from. Because I think when he started in the Nation, we didn't really know what he was.
No.
He was just kind of there. He's Kama, and they called him the God. It didn't really make any sense.
Yeah.
But then he flipped on the gas. And
then even as Godfather, as soon as he switched to that character, he won the IC title and ran with it, and he was so over.
Now, the end of his career wasn't, for the most part, the Godfather. It was the Good Father. When Right to Censor came up as a knock on the people who were calling for his censorship. What did you think of Right to Censor? The most annoying entrance music in history with just the beep, 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 beep.
Yeah, it was so weird. I get it. It was a complete opposite of what he was, super conservative.
He was the one who looked the most out of place in the outfit. Like, I thought Ivory looked good.
Ivory played it perfectly.
Ivory was perfect.
And annoying, and Val, and who was it? Buchanan?
Buchanan, that's right. Yes.
Yeah, so
I thought they could have done more with them as like a major dominant heel faction.
Yeah.
But against like a DX or something. But I think it was to fill a role. But Desiree Joseph, one more time, thank you for joining us. One more time where people can find Chutes and Ladders. Chutes and Ladders on YouTube and Spotify. Well, thank you, Desiree, for coming on. Of course, thanks, Charles Wright. I got to say, I've been holding on to this interview for a while because I work for a family-oriented news station. I'm like, oh, how am I going to get away with The Godfather? Well, I think we did today. I think we did it justice, and I don't think I'm going to get canceled anytime soon as a result. But I'm really excited to talk to him. He was one of my favorite characters throughout the entirety of the 90s. I loved Papa Shango, loved Kama, loved The Godfather. So he was definitely a fixture for that decade that was the 90s that saw WWF go from post-Hulk Hogan to the peak of the Attitude Era and beyond, and he was a major fixture throughout all of it. We've got a lot more coming up in coming weeks. River City Wrestling Con, if you're in Northeast Florida, is getting closer, June 7th and 8th. Check it out in St. Augustine area, World Golf Village. You do not want to miss it. In the next coming weeks, I'm going to start announcing the big guests they have coming to Northeast Florida. So excited to partner with them and be there for all of it. So thank you for joining us this week on the latest episode of Going Ringside. We will see you back here next time.
This has been Going Ringside with The Local Station, brought to you every Wednesday on your favorite podcast player, on News 4 Jax Plus, as well as the News 4 Jax YouTube channel.